Welcome learners to the first lesson in cell physiology. We want to discuss the meaning of cell physiology before we look at the structure and properties of the cell membrane. We are going to remind ourselves the definition of a cell, and it is the basic structural and functional unit of an organism. Remember, all activities that takes place in an organism occur at cellular level, and these include photosynthesis, respiration, reproduction, excretion, as well as protein synthesis in the ribosome. So manufacture of proteins in the ribosomes, excretion, removal of waste products. Reproduction is the fusion of male and female gametes to produce a zygote. We have respiration, that is energy breakdown in our cells to yield energy, and in the process carbon dioxide is given out. Photosynthesis is the process in which some living organisms like plants make their own food in presence of sunlight. And in the process carbon dioxide is used. Oxygen is given out during photosynthesis. That oxygen is used in respiration, and carbon dioxide from respiration is used by plants for photosynthesis. So you can see there is actually what we call recycling of materials within the environment by living organisms. So since we have known some of the activities of the cell and what a cell is, then we can define cell physiology. So cell physiology is defined as the study of cell functions, those activities that takes place within the cell. For these cellular activities that we have mentioned to run smoothly, the cell have to take in raw materials, for instance carbon dioxide, oxygen, mineral salts, and even glucose, so that all these processes can run smoothly. During these processes, waste products are released. Some of the end products of physiological processes, such as carbon dioxide, can be harmful when left or allowed to accumulate in the cells. And I have explained to you that during photosynthesis, oxygen is given out and carbon dioxide is taken in. During respiration, this oxygen from photosynthesis is used, and in the process carbon dioxide is given out, is produced. So if that carbon dioxide from respiration is left to accumulate in the cells, it is going to become toxic or poisonous to the cells. So it has to be eliminated or released. So they have to be eliminated from the cells. This means that there must be continuous flow of materials in and out of the cells and the cell organelles where these physiological processes take place. So we have seen the raw materials that are required for physiological, for the cellular activities, and in the return, waste products are removed that have to be eliminated to avoid poisoning the body cells, showing there must be continuous flow of materials. And this flow of materials occur across the cell membrane in our cells. In this chapter of cell physiology, we shall discuss the properties of the cell membrane and the process through which materials move in and out of the cell. So when we understand the membrane structure and properties, then we will know how materials move in and out. So let us begin by looking at the structure of the membrane. So how do we define a membrane, or what is a membrane in the first place? A membrane is a surface structure that encloses the cell and the cell organelles, and we have various types of membrane, like cell membrane, chloroplast membrane, nuclear membrane, mitochondrial membrane, and even the chloroplast membrane. So these are surfaces that encloses the cell and even the organelles. And the membrane have a common basic structure which regulates the movement of material in and out of the cells, because we have said there must be constant flow of materials, and these materials must be controlled or regulated. So the cell membrane is made up of protein and lipid molecules. The lipid molecules have phosphate group attached to it on one end. That is why we say phospholipids, because of attachment with phosphate at one end. Then the phospholipids are arranged to form two layers or a double layer. The ends with phosphate groups face outwards. This is it. We have two lipid molecules, and then we have between protein molecules. So we have the phosphate groups facing outwards. And the protein molecule there. And the protein molecules are scattered through the lipid double layer. Some of these proteins act as carrier molecules that channel some materials in and out of the cell. So when we say that the proteins are carriers, means that some materials are able to combine together with the proteins so that they can be carried. So these proteins will act as what we call the carrier proteins, because they transport, or they act as channels for transport of some materials. The overall thickness of the cell membrane is about 7.5 nanometers thick, meaning it is very thin for faster movement of materials across it. Apart from that, we have some pores or perforations that allow passage of substances in and out of the cell. So since we have looked at this structure of the cell membrane, that it possesses, it is made up of a double layer of phospholipid. There is some proteins which act as a carrier. Then we should look at the properties of the cell membrane that enables it to perform its physiological processes. And the first one is that we say the cell membrane is semi-permeable. When we hear the word semi, that means that because of these pores that occur on the cell membrane, it allows passage of small molecules but does not allow passage of large molecules. So like a tiny room or a classroom, you are able to pass in through the doors and even through a window, but because you are small inside. But something like a vehicle cannot get into your class through the door because it is large. So that is why that house is semi-permeable. Small molecules pass in but does not allow passage of large sized molecules. For example, the molecules of sugar and water. Sugar molecules are large. They are not going to pass through the cell membrane, but water molecules will move. So such a membrane is said to be selectively permeable or semi-permeable. It selects what can pass and it cannot pass through. The other property of the cell membrane is sensitivity to changes in temperature and pH. And the cell membrane are made up of protein. These proteins are adversely affected or greatly affected by extreme changes in temperature and pH, that is degree of acidity or alkalinity, or in short the number of hydrogen ions Changes in temperature and pH will alter the structure of the membrane, thereby hindering the normal functioning of the cell membrane. Normally, high temperatures denatures or kills or destroys the proteins, thereby impairing or disturbing the functions of the cell membrane. That is when the temperatures are high, the cell membrane or the proteins are destroyed. So it means that the temperature must be kept within our bodies moderately so that the cells can run out their functions effectively. The other property of the cell membrane is what we call polarity. And the cell membrane has both positive and negative charges. These charges affect the manner in which substances move in and out of the cell. The charges also allows the cell to detect the environmental changes. We are done with that particular lesson. Ensure you go through this assignment because practice makes perfect. Goodbye and see you in our next lesson.